conservative Constitution. We're tired of that. So you hear someone like Trump saying they're stupid, and they're evil, and we're going to stop this. We're going to put America first. And that's what Americans want to hear, at least conservatives want to hear, conservative Republicans want to hear, without looking very closely. But at everything else, he's been a Democrat all his life. If we have, and I'm hoping, I mean, one of my goals here, and teaching in school and so on, is that every single person will say, I've got to determine for myself, I've got to come up with a list of my political principles. Hopefully, if we could get at them, all of the laws of nature and of nature's God, spiritually, and the truth about government and automobiles. What's the true car? An electric car? I don't know. But wherever there's truth, that we find that truth and we implement it in our lives. And if we have a list of political principles that we believe in or believe against, then we measure, against which we measure candidates and ballot issues, then we might see things a whole lot different. I think that most of us would see through almost any politician when you're actually measuring what he says versus what he has done or what he's saying would lead to and so on. Okay, we're talking about the Establishment Clause here, and So all of this led to the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. Madison and Jefferson, emphasizing the intent of the founders, said that they wanted to eliminate forever the interference of the federal government in any religious matters. Then he talks about the Kentucky Resolutions of 1798. The Kentucky Resolutions were state resolutions. They were not national government regulations. This is after 10 years, roughly, after the Constitution had been written. And Thomas Jefferson wrote them. He didn't tell anybody at the time. It was secret. But he wrote them because he wanted to promote this idea. He believed that the national government should not be involved. But he did think that he thought that the state governments should, he said, it is true as a general principle that no power over the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, or freedom of the press being delegated to the United States, the national government, by the Constitution, all lawful powers respecting the same did of right remain and were reserved to the states and to the people. So in the Kentucky Resolutions, Jefferson said, I'm trying to just paraphrase this, that Congress shall make no law respecting establishment of religion. We already said that. Thereby guarding this in the same sentence and under the same words, freedom of religion, of speech, and of the press, insomuch that whatever violates either freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, throws down the sanctuary which covers the others. It's all about freedom of conscience. It's all about our individual agency to choose for ourselves right or wrong. And in America, our most basic doctrine, other than that that because we are the sovereigns, we are free to do and say and think anything we want as long as we don't violate other people's life, liberty, or property. Says that all of these things are withheld from the cognizance of federal tribunals. All right, the wall of separation between church and state. Thomas Jefferson was serving in the Virginia legislature, helped initiate a bill, and then when establishing a day of fasting and prayer. That's a religion thing, right? But that was in the state. He was in the state legislature. Then, when he was president, he said as president that he had, and the national government had no authority federal government to proclaim religious holidays. And so in this letter to the Danbury Baptist Church, where he uses the phrase a wall of separation between church and state, all that he was saying in there, and I don't have it here in front of me, but you can put it up on the open. I'm going to take the time to read it. Anybody can do it, and I just challenge you to do that. Look up Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist Church, and read it, and all that he is saying in there is the Establishment Clause. He's saying that the national government doesn't have any right to establish a religion, and that therefore there is a wall of separation between the national government and religion, yes.
And for 150 years, that interpretation was used by the Supreme Court.
Until the Supreme Court started interpreting it other, and now they use it totally the other way to say that.
1947, Justice Hugo Black put it separation with the wall was against free exercise, not the establishment.
Yes, and he mentions that here. I think that's in here. I'm not sure of that. In recent years, the Supreme Court has undertaken to use this metaphor as an excuse for meddling in religious issues arising within the various states. It is not only presumed the Supreme Court is not only presumed to take jurisdiction in these disputes, but has actually forced the states to take the same hands-off position toward religious matters, even though this restriction originally applied only to the federal government. This obvious this obvious distortion of the original intent of Jefferson, when he used the metaphor of a wall separating church and state, becomes entirely apparent when the statements and actions of Jefferson are examined in the historical content. All right, so actually Jefferson and Madison talks about we're anxious that the state should get involved, and well, let's just talk about that too. That that the various states would intervene in religious matters so as to provide for equality among all religions, and that all churches or religions assigned preferential treatment should not be disestablished from such preferment. They were in favor of letting the states establish religion if they wanted to do that, and that was what they said in the Constitution. Founders. Okay, let's go on over here to Jefferson's wall was obviously intended only for the federal government, and the Supreme Court application of this metaphor to the states has come under severe criticism, mostly by Cleon Skousen and people that believe the same thing here. Religious problems must be solved within the various states. I'm going to take time to go over that. Affirmative actions to encourage all religions on the state level. I'll be the first one to say that Cleon Skousen he's what we call an originalist. Not original intent. I mean, he's original intent also, but he's an originalist when it comes to this issue. And the issue is, and this is why I put it on here, the 14th Amendment. U.S. Supreme Court interpretations of the 14th Amendment. I could have added congressional uses of the 14th Amendment to do whatever they wanted in religion, and also our president doing so. The 14th Amendment said so. In the context, the 14th Amendment, we had the 3 Civil War amendments. We're trying to get rid of slavery and give the male votes, males freed slaves, the right to vote, and to make sure that there was no discrimination on the basis of race and there was equal protection of the laws. So in the 14th Amendment, you had the various clauses. There was another due process clause that said, the Fifth Amendment due process clause said the national government couldn't take away your life, liberty, or property without due process of law. But the 14th Amendment said the state governments couldn't take away your life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And it said that they couldn't deny to the citizens the privileges and immunities, which we're not going to spend time on right now. We've spent some time in the past. And it said that there would be equal protection, there would be equal. They could not. No states could deny to citizens equal protection of the laws. And so we have this thing called selective incorporation. I guess I could have put it on there. But selective incorporation was the process, it's what we call the process by which especially the U.S. Supreme Court used the 14th Amendment over the next 40 or 50 years or more, 60, 70 years, to virtually apply every single one of the Bill of Rights that only limited the national government now to all of the state governments. That means that now the state governments can't establish religion, which they could do to begin with. That's okay with me. That's okay with me. That doesn't bother me. The state's governments can't prohibit my free exercise right. That's okay with me. They can't my freedom of speech and so on. Well, so what's wrong with that? What's the problem? Why does Skousen and many other people feel that they've gone too far with it, Milton?
Because gays in any state can get married. They've got to be able to get married in all states and be recognized in all states.
That's one of the major deals, because the disagreement with same-sex marriage or homosexual activity is based on some religious principles. I'm going to do this. This will be the last thing that I do.
Religious principles.
Pardon?
Not just some. Yeah. It's totally based on religious principles.
Yes. Well, it's probably based on some biological and so, I mean, you know, it's unnatural. And it's these people who are against